Hi, I'm Brian from Reason Test Prep. In this video, we're going to talk about the key to a high GMAT or GRE score. So I think a lot of people get started on preparing for these tests and they don't really understand what the true nature of the GMAT and the GRE are. And they spend a lot of time preparing this. We get a lot of people who contact us and are frustrated because they've been at it for many, many months and are not really making headway. Their score isn't really where they want it to be. And so I think the very first thing, either, you're watching this video and you've already done a lot of prep, or maybe you're thinking of getting started, or you're just getting started. I mean, really, the first thing you want to do is have a real understanding of what the tests are about. And that really is the key to successful GMAT and GRE prep, and really the key to a very high score. So what is that key? So basically, the GMAT and the GRE are tests of quantitative and verbal reasoning. They are reasoning tests. That's why we're called Reason Test Prep, because that's our emphasis, is on the reasoning and critical thinking aspects of the tests. So if you don't understand that, then you're very likely never going to get a very high score. So most people just misunderstand this, and they focus on what I would call, content mastery. So they learn all their rules and formulas and concepts, and if it's a GRE, they study all this vocabulary, and that stuff's important. Like the vocabulary in particular is very important, and all other things equal, it's good to know your rules and formulas. I mean, if we're talking about the GRE, if you don't know the formula for an area of a circle, like, you're obviously at a disadvantage. So obviously, learning that foundational set of knowledge that they expect you to have, that is definitely part of successfully preparing for these tests, but it's not enough. It's necessary, but not sufficient. So if you're not understanding that, that's not what they're testing. They're expecting you to have that knowledge, but that's not really what they're testing you on. They're testing you on your ability to take that knowledge and apply critical thinking to it, and apply, quantitative and verbal reasoning. So anyway, yes, the point is that content mastery is important, but the quantitative and verbal reasoning are far more important, and you can't achieve a top score without them. So I'm going to give an example here, and truthfully, this was very hard to give an example, to pick an example, because there's just so many examples, and it was almost an embarrassment of riches. Very hard to actually choose one that I think would be the best one to choose. So perhaps this isn't even the best one that I could have chosen, but I think this question will do a good job. And also, just caveat here is that this is a quantitative question. I easily could have picked a verbal question and tried to demonstrate the extent of verbal reasoning. And, that's particularly evident, again, on GRE vocab-based questions, where you might think you just need to know the vocabulary, just know the words. And that's not, again, that helps a lot. It's important to know vocabulary words, but that's not sufficient. A lot of the hard questions are hard, not because the vocabulary is hard, but because the kind of reasoning that you have to apply is difficult and beyond some people. So anyway, so we're going to use a quantitative question here. This happens to be a GMAT question. It could easily be a GRE question. I picked one that I think would be, pretty smart to expect something like this on either test. So let's take a look at this. So an integer and between 1 and 99 inclusive is to be chosen at random. What is the probability that n times n plus 1 will be divisible by 3? So let me just start by saying that because I've done this question with so many students, I can just tell you that in my experience, one of a couple different things happens here. First, people usually are just intimidated by this question and they have no idea how to solve it. So, they're just like, I just don't know. I don't know how I could possibly do this. But other people, especially people who have already prepared for the test, especially the GMAT, they will often look at it and say, oh, I learned this. N times n plus 1, that's consecutive integers. There's some rule here about divisibility by 3 with consecutive integers. I can't remember what the rule is. And usually I'm internally just thinking like this person is, trying to leverage content, right? They learned some rule about this and they think that this question is just testing them on the application of that rule. And it's really not. I mean, first of all, you don't need to know that rule to answer this question. And even knowing the rule is honestly not even that helpful because, again, in my experience, most people, even when they think they know what they should do here on a like sort of content level, they think they've memorized some rule about consecutive integers, they almost always get the question wrong. So it's really just a good example of a reasoning question where I don't think you really need to know a lot of content. And yet I think you do need to have pretty robust reasoning. And it could be absent a lot of content and you could still get this question right. So what would I suggest here? Well, I mean, in general, we really kind of teach people here at Reason Test Prep to try to make things more tangible. So more concrete instead of so abstract. So rather than thinking of, oh, that's consecutive integers and what's the rule there, I think just getting in there with some numbers is helpful. And the other thing is, you're talking about a large set of numbers here, right? From 1 to 99. So it's too many numbers to possibly process, right? You're not gonna be able to pick a number for every number from 1 to 99. So in a case like that, often there's gonna be some pattern. And if you sort of play with it a little bit, you'll be able to spot the pattern. So, it helps to maybe have seen questions like this with divisibility where you might suspect that there's a pattern, but honestly, even if you had never seen anything like this, it's a good bet that there'll be some pattern in the numbers where certain ones are divisible by 3 and others are not. So, I would just start at n equals 1, right? So if n is 1, you're gonna have 1 times 2. Now, you could multiply those and say that's 2, and so no, that's not divisible by 3. That's fine. But as the numbers get bigger, there is a content piece that would help you here. You don't need it. You could just keep multiplying and say, okay, that's 6, that's a yes, and keep going. But it's actually helpful to understand that if there's a 3 in it or a multiple of 3, then the whole number will be divisible by 3, right? So just like as a side here, if I said, 9 times 17 or something like that, right? If I divide that by 3, 9 has a 3 in it. It's 3 times 3. So yes, that's going to be divisible by 3. But again, you don't even need to know that. That would help probably speed this up, but it's not necessary to get this question right. So I'm going to cheat here though and use that. So 3 times 4, yeah, that's going to be a yes. And then n equals 4 is going to be 4 times 5. That's going to be a no because first of all, 20, right, is not divisible by 3, but also because you don't have a multiple of 3. Neither one of these, if you were to factor them, would have a 3 in them. So no. N equals 5. 5 times 6. Okay, that's a yes. N equals 6. 6 times 7. That's going to be a yes. And what you'll see is, seems like maybe a pattern starting to develop here, right? No, yes, yes. No, yes, yes. If we go to n equals 7, predictably, that's a no. And also, it helps to just be mindful that we're talking about divisibility by 3. So maybe something's going to happen at every 3, like n equals 3, n equals 6, or just every batch of 3, maybe there'll be some sort of cycle. And indeed, that's what's happening, right? It's no, yes, yes, and then no, yes, yes. And then, in the next cycle, we start again with a no. So here, some people then try to ask themselves, okay, let me think about how many numbers are there from 1 to 99. But honestly, you can just look at this and say, basically, it's 2/3, right? 2 out of every 3 are going to be divisible by 3. Now, if the question said, you might worry, but what if the cycle got split? Like right here, if it said, if n is a number between 1 and 7, it wouldn't exactly be 2 out of 3 because you have kind of one more no thrown in there, right? It would be 4 out of 7. But, with 99 numbers, it's either going to be 2 out of 3 or it's going to be very, very close to 2 out of 3, right? So looking at these answers, nothing's really very close if we're talking about 99 numbers. If it's not 66 over 99, then it's 67 over 99 or 65 over 99, and none of these 1/2 and 5/6 are not close enough to that. So yeah, it has to be 2/3. So yeah, again, is there some content way to get there? We're just knowing about consecutive integers and divisibility by 3. Yes, presumably there is, but I've almost never seen anyone get this question right using that, even people who've studied that and think they know that rule. And I would never do it myself because this is a pretty easy question if you just start to put numbers down, do them consecutively, look for a pattern, and voila, it's there. So anyway, this is this would be considered a hard question. Certainly very hard by GRE standards. Even by GMAT standards, this would be a harder question. And yet, again, there isn't much content that one needs to know to get this question right. And really there is, a pretty robust kind of reasoning that one needs to apply, I would say, to get it right. So anyway, that's a great example of, what happens at the higher levels on GRE and GMAT questions. Okay, so now, great. That's all well and good. So, you might ask, all right, how do I prepare then for the GMAT or the GRE with this knowledge on board, with a focus on reasoning? So, the first thing is you need to be deliberate in your practice and really reflect on how you're approaching questions. So, when you do a question, don't just be like, I got it right, or, I got that one wrong, or, okay, it took a little bit long on that one. You really want to examine what you're doing after each question you do. So why did I take so long on that? Or, okay, I got it right, but that felt like a lot of energy, a lot of effort. Is there some way maybe that I could have done this, more quickly? Now, it can be hard to figure out what you're missing when you're not seeing a more effective approach. Obviously that's where tutoring is helpful. That's a large part. That's the majority of what we do here at Reason Test Prep, honestly, is helping people understand how to approach questions more effectively. But you can, on your own, seek out effective, creative solutions. So, for example, the forums, GMAT Club is a great forum. And if you Google any, GMAT question, and you'll also find a lot of GRE questions out there on like GRE Club and sometimes on GMAT Club, you will often find, a variety of solutions. Often the first solutions you see in these forums will be very mathy and not very creative. But if you, scroll down and look, often you'll see someone suggesting something much, much better. So that's a good way that you can sort of connect the dots, even if you don't have a tutor. And the sort of the final thing, and I guess the sort of umbrella thing over all of this is you just have to maintain the right mentality. You have to align yourself with what the GMAT and the GRE are really meant to measure and reward in the first place, which is reasoning. Again, the sections are called quantitative reasoning and verbal reasoning. So it's pretty smart to really dial that up and focus on the kind of quantitative and verbal reasoning that, that you're going to apply as you're doing practice questions and ultimately, on the actual test. Okay, I hope you found this video helpful. If so, please feel free to subscribe. And if you know of anyone else who you think might find it helpful, please feel free to share it with them. Thanks for watching.